Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today in our show, we have a very special artist who's been with us for over 40 years. She's been on the jazz scene for decades. And she's worked with so many greats from Terry Lynn Carrington, Kenny Barron, Bobby Watson, Jerry Allen. I can go on and on. Curtis Lundy. She is a jazz vocalist, a musician, educator, arranger, composer, actress, and I consider her to be the best dressed lady in jazz. Please welcome to the show, Miss Carmen Lundy. How are you?
Preston, well, nice to see you. I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in here.
You look great. You look great. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And as I said, I've been wanting to get you on the show for quite a while now. And I had talked to your friend, Bobby Watson. He says, oh, yeah, I'll put you in touch with her. But Carmen, as I said, you've been on the jazz scene for over 40 years. You've put out so much wonderful music. And I was telling a friend, I says, Carmen is probably one of the most prolific artists I've ever heard. I don't know too many jazz artists that writes all of their own music, composes and does everything. I mean, you do it all. And just wanted to know more about your humble beginnings, where all this started, how you got involved in music. I understand that you are from Miami, Florida. Tell us a little bit about your background and how all this began.
Well, the music began early on as a lot of us grow up in families where somebody plays an instrument, or there was a time, I think maybe I'm a little baby boomer gal,
Okay.
And my mother and father, let's see, well, there's 7 of us, and I'm the oldest of 7. So a lot of the beginning of the family, I was kind of privy to the early beginnings of our family.
Right.
Curtis and I are 11 months apart.
Right.
I guess we call us Irish twins. So, we grew up as kids watching our grandparents and their kids all play music, but not perform necessarily. But that was that came along, I think, in their journey. But I think there was so much music in the expression of the church life. My aunt, Emma Miller, who is now, I think she's in kind of late 70s, was playing piano for the church when I was a little girl, and she still plays for that church, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And she has a killer Hammond B3 sound that is absolutely irreparable. I mean, you cannot, don't even try to copy what she's doing.
Right.
So my aunt means a lot to me. My mother's influence as a vocalist. She was a great leader in the sense of, of taking charge in the music. She sang with the same 5 or 6 women, and maybe one came and one left, but it was always 5 or 6 voices, sort of like the Caravans were, the staple singers had that kind of vibe going.
Right.
On. And she introduced me to a lot of the great gospel groups like the Highway QCs and the 5 Blind Boys. That's how I grew up, hearing a lot of this great stuff. My grandfather played guitar, and I remember his sound was tremolo. He went for that tremolo sound in his guitar. So my mother sang in this gospel group, right? So we would be in church. There was a pattern in the church where every first Sunday, her gospel group would sing, every first Sunday. So they rehearsed for that at some point in the month. So as a little girl, I was sitting and watching them rehearse and really checking out how they would have these different parts that lined up, alto, soprano, tenor. And then I would hear the performance, or this, they would just, everybody in the church would just be slayed for, an hour or 2 on the same jam. So
now, Carmen, your mother was in a group called the Apostolic Singers, right? Was that the name of her group? Yeah.
Okay. And, I have to, just a side note, I realized when I was maybe in my early 40s that my mother had never recorded with this group, ever.
Really?
Somebody might have had a cassette at one of their singings, as we call them, but they were singings, they weren't concerts.
Okay.
But they never recorded. So back in the late 90s, we took them into the studio. Actually, it was the early 90s. I decided we should do something about that. So it was kind of great to record them and interview them and document their history. And I still have all this footage on VHS.
Wow.
I thought I thought I had this brilliant idea to take it to Costco and have them copy everything. And they copied everything, but it looks as bad as so I can't edit it. So I'm still stuck with all this footage, and I've got to figure out a way to transfer, because it's everybody's story, and it's a lot of footage, and eventually I will tell their story, because it really is a fantastic, fantastic story. So that's my early childhood. So around the time of 4 or 5, I started piano lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was because my mother noticed that I was poking out these little tunes on the piano by ear or by air, depending on your accent or the vernacular. And that was kind of the beginning of the studying, the learning how to associate a note on the page with a note that you would play or sing.
Mm-hmm.
So those were great. All I remember about it was fun. I didn't really know about classical music. I didn't really know about the sacred. I just knew gospel.
Yeah.
And I have a cousin, my mother's brother's wife's brother, Joe Lewis, who was a great guitar player, great blues guitarist. So it was just a big deal when he came to town. And to just experience, I don't know, jazz is like this too, but to experience blues in the room, like true, nothing but, the honest to goodness, beautiful sound of it, to be in the room with it, I think can be life altering, and certainly affect you to the point of where you want this music in your life forever. And that's kind of what happened. Those are my early days.
So by the time you were 12 years old, you decided you wanted to be a singer, huh?
I knew I was going to do something in music by the time I was 12. We have those civics classes, in middle school,
right?
You get civics and social studies and all that. So those were the times when they started talking about vocation and thinking about your future and what it is you wanted to do. And I can remember my grade school, the principal of my grade school was retiring.
Right.
And I had to have been maybe by this time 7th or 8th grade. And they invited some of the kids from the grade school back as representatives of each class that he was the principal over during that period. So I was invited back, and you have to write down what you want to be when you grow up on this index card. And when they introduce you, they would read your index card. And I can remember Mrs. Ford reading my card and going, well, Carmen Lundy, she wants to be an international singing success. And everybody cracked up. Everybody cracked up. I mean, it's just so funny. I just remember that moment. I'm thinking, well, what's so wrong with that? And I just set out. I mean, I never really, there wasn't like a plan. I just had fun. So because I had just enough understanding of reading from the piano lessons, it was easy to transfer over to the choral music.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I elected it or it was just a natural thing, because you find that you have a lot more sopranos usually than you do altos and women's voices. Yeah. So I chose the alto voice. And that wasn't so daunting either, because I can remember how my mother's voices, the group, they would, line up the chord, and they would sort of sing the do, the mi, the so, the fa, the la, And so this was an easy thing for me to transition into without really having an understanding of classical music, as it were. I was still too young, and it wasn't part of my family life.
Yeah. So during your teenage years, were you in any local bands in Florida?
No, that was Curtis.
Oh, Curtis? Okay.
Yeah, Curtis started, I think Curtis became a band leader when he was like 14.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think one of his first gigs was with a group called the Ocean Liners. The Ocean Liners are what everybody knows as the KC and the Sunshine Band.
Okay.
So a lot of those members of the Ocean Liners became this other thing, But when I was about 16 years old, I was playing piano in high school and accompanying another vocalist or any vocalist for the talent show. So I got the little gig the no paying gig of accompanying the little Temptations group, you know, the 4 or 5 guys, you know, I would play there. You got me going in circles.
Right.
Ba, ba, ba. Great tune, by the way.
Yeah.
So I had that gig, and then I was also accompany another vocalist, and we became fast friends and started a little duet or duo, if you will. And we would do duets, and I would accompany, and you know, she'd be in front of the mic, and I'd be at the piano with my mic, and we did that for a while. And that was around the time of I guess I was maybe a 10th grader. So we got a little chance to make a record. So
wow.
my first record, my first recording session was in Miami at Criteria Recording Studios. Some of you might recognize Criteria because Aretha Franklin made a lot of great records down in Miami. A lot of people would come to Miami naturally during the winter, get away from the cold too. And the studio was great. So there I am doing my first record, The Price of Silence. The flip side was Boy, I'm the Girl for You. Yeah. And I guess at that point I figured I was gonna really go zoom right to the top. And there was another plan, a greater plan, a greater scheme. So we did that record, and I think our families passed the acetate back and forth. And like, we wouldn't even get 2 copies. So it was like, your turn, my turn, you know.
Right.
And Curtis was busy performing. He had okay, imagine the family room in your house being a rehearsal space. And that's what my family room was like for about 4 or 5 years. There was always a set of drums in the family room that were left there. Curtis's bands would sort of mimic James Brown's ensemble. So there was always a trumpet, always a saxophone, alto saxophone. There was always somebody would show up on trombone. Everybody had nicknames. So it was Mike DeMoe was the drummer. You know, it's like, I don't even know these guys' real names. So Curtis would rehearse this band after school for some gig they got somewhere. Meanwhile, you know, I'm the oldest of, you know, by the time I think this was happening, there might have been 6 or 7 of us. So I was sort of the older, responsible, having to look after the younger kids. So I was at home a lot after school. And because I was at home a lot after school, that's when I would be at the piano. So to keep my eye out and doing this at the same time, figuring out little tunes. And one day my dad overheard me having transcribed some pop tune at the time. It was an instrumental called Soulful Strut. Sha-da-da-da-da, da-da-ba-do-ba-da-ba.
Yeah.
Ba-ba-ba. So I learned that entire piano solo. So every day after my father came home from work, he would have me to play this whole ditty. So the whole memory, all of these memories are fun. They're fond. And it's sort of, I kind of feel like maybe somewhere in the back of my head, I did have this idea that I was going to do this, but I was conflicted between piano and voice. I was conflicted, I was.
Yeah.
And I think I walked away from the piano as a potential performance accent to whatever I was doing, or, you know, I didn't think of myself as the accompanying vocalist. So around that time, Roberta Flack was very popular. And she was indeed the accompanying vocalist. And she was the first, and Aretha was too.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about this, all those great singers play for themselves. My God, Dinah Washington, Carmen McRae, Sarah. I knew nothing about jazz. I knew nothing about jazz, singing, jazz. I heard none of it. I think around the time of the age of 12, 14, I saw the first Black female vocalist on television. And that did it. I think that was really the key that unlocked that dream for me.
Wow.
I was watching the Ed Sullivan Show, and this gorgeous woman of color is standing there, commanding the listener to pay attention on the Ed Sullivan Show. And I'm all of like 12 or 13. I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. I thought I was going to be a flight attendant, go into social work or something. But I do all of that. I fly, fly for for the love of the song and you know, meeting beautiful people all over the world and being somewhat of an ambassador for the music.
Yes.
So I kind of found myself doing those things, but the early days were just part of the fun, and it was a wonderful way to develop friendships and feel like I was fitting in somewhere. You know, those things are important when you're an adolescent.
So Carmen, let's fast forward a little bit. By the time you get to college, you end up studying opera.
Well, I like to call it classical voice.
Classical voice, okay.
Yeah, and there were a couple of operas, but this is my first opera that I performed in was Carmen.
Okay.
But I wasn't it wasn't the lead role. I was one of the maidens, you know, playing the card games, you know, the little chorus girls.
Mm-hmm.
And my last note was a high A. I'm good, whatever it was. And I can remember that I could not nail that high A. Okay, I could not do it. So the vocalist Nikki Schiff, who was a veteran at that time, she was a veteran to me. She might have been a senior by then, but she was standing in the wings, and when that note came, she would stand in the wings and pop the note out for me in the performance.
Incredible.
So it was clear to me that while I was doing the best thing possible for the human voice, which is I was actually taking voice lessons, developing a technique, understanding how to have a healthy approach to putting the song in the room, you know, all those things were so important. But the repertoire was not something I think I had an affinity for, you know. I think coming up in the gospel and hearing the blues, I wasn't comfortable not veering from the melody, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
And in the classical literature, you respect the composer's written language, you know, verbatim. So I like the flexibility that I experienced away from this particular genre of music. And the flexibility, I think, was where I knew I was better at it.
Yeah.
I think I was better at it and had something to say, something to offer there. So my first year, I'm going to say my freshman year, I was in the classical program and discovered that there was a great jazz school on the second floor of the music building, a great jazz program. And at the time, I can remember the main room, room 206 or 202, gosh, I said it. And at the apex of the room was the album cover, John Coltrane's A Love Supreme.
Oh, wow. And
that album cover was the only thing in that room for the entire time I went to that school, okay? Wow. So this was what we were about in this room, you know? So here I am in this classical department doing that stuff, and the madrigals and the chamber singers and the small, you know, 16 voice choir and all that luscious, beautiful a cappella sound, sometimes accompanied. And some of the jazz artists who were, you know, maybe in an arranging course, or maybe they were in a composition course, they would ask me to do a vocal for them, just so they could hear what their tune was like. So here I am singing original music for my classmates. And I'm all of like, you know, I don't know, what was I, 20, 21 years old, 19, something like that. So I got my first real 6 nights a week, performing every night, 3 sets. The end of my freshman year, I was gigging every night I had the same gig at the Eden Rock Hotel for a year, 5 nights a week. 3 sets, 9 to 1. And I was in the front room of the hotel. The main room was where Frank Sinatra and the Smothers Brothers and all those guys would play. Yes. So they'd come through, and it was a great, and I shared the bill with a vocalist who would accompany herself on guitar and only did Joni Mitchell tunes, which is how I learned Joni Mitchell tunes, was for somebody else, you know, another singer. Well, that's when the career really, that's when I think I began to make this shift from the classical commitment to really dedicating myself to a life of jazz. And I didn't really know what that was going to be. I just started out and was introduced to jazz by Dave Roystein, who's now the head of the Cal Arts Jazz Department here in Southern California for the last 30 years. I think he's been there. Mm-hmm. David introduced me to jazz when I asked him to accompany me for a talent show. And the tune I did was Trying Times by Roberta Flack, which I've been hearing a lot lately on Instagram. But that was the first solo piece of mine was Trying Times. And David had a beautiful approach to the instrument. So while he had the classical understanding, he also was very much into Bill Evans at the time. Mm-hmm. And David introduced me to Bill Evans. He introduced me to Cannonball, Herbie. You know, this is like, I'm a junior in high school, and I'm just, it's like, I don't know, it's like an awakening of some kind. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know everything I could about this sound. And meanwhile, I still don't even know that there's jazz vocalists. I just love this instrumental music he's turning me on to.
Right.
One of the first records where I heard the jazz voice was in a record that Cannonball did, which I have not been able to find since then. It's called The Happy People. And it's a record that he does, and he introduces the Brazilian flavor.
Okay.
So it was like a lot of la's and ahs and all of that stuff, but it was still not, familiar to me. So I was fascinated by all of that. My sophomore year, the jazz pianist, the primary jazz piano teacher, Vince Maggio, started a class, a 2-hour class for singers, where he would tell us what we were going to sing next week. We couldn't even choose. It was like, you're going to go find this tune. Glad to be unhappy. Go find this tune. Boom. And then we come back the next week and we would perform it. He would accompany us. Wow. But he would have all this stuff written out on the blackboard and all this information about what are you paying attention to, what are you listening to. So I got this great introduction to jazz vocal singing from a pianist. And I think he had some experience early in his career, having accompanied Lena Horne. He understood and appreciated the lyric, the song. Some people don't know that a song, a tune doesn't necessarily have lyrics, but a song always does.
Yeah.
So that time for me was so great. So what happened was, now the word's sort of floating around that Carmen will do your tune. She'll do it, give it to her. And I was having a lot of fun with that. So at some point, I went to my voice teacher, my private voice teacher, and asked her what was the likelihood or the probability of my being allowed to change my major to jazz, because there was no curriculum for the voice in this particular genre. In this particular end of the studies and the curriculum. So they got together with the head of the, this department, that department, they decided to let me switch my major. So there I am, whoopee, but here I am in class with improvisers, having to play Moment's Notice and scat over it and learn all these tunes and, hang with these instrumentalists. And not really getting that there was this whole world of vocal jazz. Still not really understanding that. But the whole of the being allowed to switch my major it says a lot about the school at that time. Yeah. It wasn't a rigid kind of a thing at all. And I was the first vocalist to sort of have the legitimate interest and studies where I was a bona fide jazz major. I became a jazz major. And, it's just a beautiful story. Meanwhile, I'm singing every night. I'm singing, I tell you, every night, 3 sets, 9 to 1, 6 nights a week, and 8:30 theory class, and I did that. I did that for the entire time I was at school.
It's like training on the job,
Yeah, so David and I put that first group together. It was David's band and I was the vocalist, the one that I mentioned to you. Actually, there was one before that on North Miami Beach where Jaco Pastorius
Right.
and Ira Sullivan, and we would share the bill at the Lion Share, which was in Fort Lauderdale. That was actually the first little series.
Right.
And then David put a group together with, I got to say their names, Steve Goldstein, Paula Rose, Del Baroni, or Matt Benelli, Dave Broidstein, and Peter Harris. So my true vibe of Carmen Ensemble, I dig having a guitar in the band and or percussion. I like the, not just always the piano, bass, drums trio thing that you associate with jazz vocal.
Right.
I like the expansion of the guitar and the way you can get more colors in the sound. So that's really kind of what happened. So Curtis and I think by this time it's 1975. He's got his whole thing happening. Bobby Watson has now come into the University of Miami program. And he told you about all those other great players.
I couldn't believe it. You know, Bruce Hornsby, Pat Metheny. I said, all of you guys were there together. And that's, you know, one of the things that I love, Carmen, I love how all throughout your career, your brother has always been with you. I think that is beautiful. It's like you brought him along with you. It's like everywhere you see Carmen, you see Curtis as
I think
well.
he brought me along with him.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow. But no, that's incredible. All those fantastic people. What was your perception of someone like Jaco Pastorius? I mean, could you see then that this guy would go on to be one of the greatest electric bassists of all time, to revolutionize the instrument?
I saw that with everybody. I saw it with everybody I worked with. For me, they were all like Jaco. It was the same with Hiram Bullock, or it was the same with Goldstein, Gill, or Metheny. Yeah. We all, or Bobby, we all represented that. So there was nothing particularly unique about Jaco's approach that wasn't, you know, equally as interesting to me from a guitarist approach who was killing, you know. But I will say this, Jaco's sound that we all have come to know, he had already developed that, you know, way before Weather Report learned of him. Right. Jaco had already sorted out this approach, you know, the way he used the harmonics, the fretless. And Curtis and Jaco played the same bass for a long time.
Really?
It might have been the bass, you know, it might have been the perfect, how shall I say, you know, if it's fretless, then your whole position is going to be more like what you would be, you know, without the frets on it. You're going to have to really know those positions.
Right.
The necks are a lot different. I think that, you know, of course, the upright bass is going to have a fatter neck, but Jaco and Curtis were pretty much doing a lot of the same things. But I think Jaco introduced more of a solo approach to his playing. And he played a lot of the top end of the bass, even though he had great bottom. They played the same amp, those acoustic amps. I don't know if you remember those early.
I do.
Yeah, concerts where the amp was just like tall, you know, as tall as Jaco,
right,
twice as wide as him, you know. But I recall those were our gigs. Those were the kind of things we brought. Those were our PA systems, and those were our amps back then. We kicked it, you know. It was a time of exploration. Jazz was. We had the influx of Motown, R&B, you know, meets the Beatles, and all that stuff was happening anyway in the music. So for us in our generation, incorporating a lot of those new sounds was hip. It was cool. It was fun, and we could. I think in a way we defined ourselves then. So what you get from Jaco now was Jaco defining his sound. Way back then, one of my drummers, we shared the same drummer for a little while in our careers. His name is Bobby Conamo.
Oh, I know Bobby. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jaco and Bobby were sort of like, you know, if you think of Paul Chambers and Jimmy Cobb, you know, it was like, you know.
Yeah.
So and we watched that. So you know, Jaco would. There was a pianist in that group his name was Alex Darkey. And I think when the Fender Rhodes electric piano was all the rage. And that gig at the Lion Share was Ira Sullivan with Alex Darkey, Bobby Conamo, and Jaco. And we were playing opposite one another for a little hit there. For I don't know how long it lasted. So all of those players, we all played Miami. It wasn't just me and my band or Curtis and his band or Jocko. Everybody was somewhere hitting. Now, I should mention that the concert jazz band, all those great horn players, were the cats that would get the gigs for the guys that were, come in, all the big acts. So they would hire local horn players to cover those seats. You wouldn't be traveling with, 17-piece band. Right. Frank wouldn't do that all the time. Joe Williams and those guys, they would pick up the best guys in the cities that they were touring. Mm-hmm. So I got to hear a lot of those great people like that. I got to hear Monty Alexander for the first time in Miami. I got to hear Joe Williams for the first time in my career in Miami. I met Curtis Fuller in Miami. Wow. And a lot of the New York critics don't really know this about me that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. They kind of prefer and more comfortable with me moving to New York and starting a career in jazz, which is ridiculous. At least, you can do that now. Maybe you could do that in the 80s, but you weren't doing that kind of thing in the 70s. You were plying your trade and trying to just find out about the music. So the Miami time was beautiful. That's when I had a composition course that I was thrust into. So I had to write a song. Really? Write what? What? Those were the best. Those were the best developmental years for me. I didn't know New York. I had never visited New York. Nobody in my family talked about New York. I might have had, a course where somebody mentioned the Empire State Building or said something like Broadway, but it didn't mean anything to me. Yeah. So around the third or fourth year, when everybody started graduating, so I'm looking up and what happened to Pat? Where is Mark? Where's Cliff Carter? Where is everybody? Oh, well, Phyllis Hyman was also the other jazz vocalist in town by then. So now fast forward like 76 around there, Phyllis started her career in Miami. Wow. So everybody's leaving. So this is when I started hearing about New York. Well, what is New York? What is it? And also so-and-so's on 74th Street, and I heard that so-and-so got a place on 79th, and I'm thinking, we're that close, So it felt like it was the right move for me to make.
Yeah, late 1978, around that time you moved to New York.
I moved to New York, May 1978.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I went to New York. Before that, I thought, well, look, let's be smart about this. I should go and at least see what New York is, and I had 3 or 4 big band charts because I had done the year before the Montreux Jazz Festival with the big band, which is where I met the Brecker Brothers. Yeah. And I was doing the Brecker Brothers tunes the summer before, so I kind of knew who they were. So I decided I should go to New York and just, take a look for myself. So a friend of mine from Switzerland and I met in New York, and we went down to the Village Vanguard on a Monday night. And that night, Thad Jones and Mel Lewis were playing. Yeah. And I took my big band charts with me. And really? After the first set, I asked them if I could sit in. I told them I had my charts. They were like, okay, Mel, okay, check this out. This kid says she's got her charts with her. What do you think? Should we let her sit in? What do you think? Mm-hmm. So they played, we did Pieces of Dreams, a tune by Michel Legrand. And we did I'll Remember April. And those guys sight read my charts that night. So that was my entree into New York, was sitting in with Thad and Mel on a Monday night out of nothing, like out of just having a little chutzpah. Yeah. And they were sweet. I have to say that about all, 99% of all the players in New York, sweetheart, generous, like welcoming the next, kind of like, sort of like, I don't know, scooting us in and turning us in the right direction and helping us to really establish ourselves. So that's really what New York was for me. So when I got there, I got a great gig. I was the house vocalist for a year at a great club that somebody actually reminded me of, because they remembered being in the audience then. It was called Jazz Mania, owned by a guy named Mike Morgenstern. And Mike hired me as the house vocalist. And I met everybody. I met, the Kenny Barons, the Walter Bishop Jr.'s, the Ronnie Matthewses, and on and on and on, and great bass players, Buster Williams. And so, I mean, it was just, it was really like that thing where they say build and they will come, or whatever. Just chart that course and trust that you're going to be okay. Yeah. And that's kind of how things started for me in New York. This was pre-competition for jazz. We weren't, the days of the Apollo were, 40s, 50s, maybe early 60s into, late 60s. Mm-hmm. But there was no competition to join, to sign up for, or to enter, to get to jumpstart your career. None of that was really available to us.
Yeah.
We really had to kind of step in. But that whole decade of the 80s was great, because more often than not, you would go to anybody's set and everybody was playing their own music. This wasn't the gig at Jazz Mania was not. I would call a tune, what key, Carmen? Like Someone in Love, A flat, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that's how I got started. That's what happened.
Wow. Now, Carmen, what type of advice did like a Thad Jones give you? I mean, after they saw you and you sat in, I'm sure they were saying, boy, this young lady really has something.
I don't remember.
Really? Okay.
I don't remember. I think I was so, I didn't really know who Thad Jones and Mel Lewis were. Do you know what I mean? And there was this big band at the Vanguard. But I don't think I knew who I was really asking, if I could sit in with. I just, I do remember that they had a vocalist named Birdie Green. Mm-hmm. I think was the vocalist on call with that band. But, you got to remember, I go there, I sing these songs. It's the second set, so everybody kind of splits after that. And I go back to Miami the next day or the day after, and with this newfound, sense of purpose, which is I'm going to move to New York. So I planned for a year. So I had a gig in Coconut Grove, and it was my regular gig for 3 years straight. And that last year, I decided to just save all my earnings with the interest of packing it in and move to New York. And I don't remember. You're asking me about advice. I don't know if it was so much advice as it was encouragement.
Okay.
I think that's more of what I recall is a kind of a non-threatening environment. Just a wonderful, embracing, maybe there was some kind of there's something really, what's the word? Endearing about the young, aspiring artist who's got all this energy and really is going for it, has some chops and has a little musicality. My whole deal was to prove that I was a musician, not a singer. And that's very important for people to get. That I wanted these people to know that I was a musician. So if I said, what tune, Carmen? A flat. Oh, and I would, show up and, speak low. I love that too. So I would have my little arrangement. So I'd hand them my little chart, So when those players, those veteran cats realized, she actually knows what's happening here. That was great. So for me, that first year in New York was about, yes, I'm a vocalist, but I know my music. And so I just set out to develop my repertoire at that point and play with whoever would let me. And I started to, booking my own gigs, and I just, pounded the pavement, made, just, do your own publicity. And you can't hear me? Hello? I didn't touch anything. Oh no. Elizabeth.
I think it's because it's 40 minutes.
Do I have to start another session?
Oh, you just came back. You just
Yeah.
came back. Oh gosh, the sound went out. I'm like, Carmen was getting into it and I lost her. The sound went out.
What was I talking
You,
about?
you were, the last thing you said, you just talked about you came back to Miami with this newfound, I guess, sense of
Purpose. It was like, I'm packing my bags, I'm moving to New York. And,
hmm
you know, by that time, the gigs weren't, you know, I wanted to record,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So I had, you know, now these new goals are starting to enter and I wanted to record. So I think that the whole New York thing was about proving I'm a musician. I did my own arrangements.
hmm
I wasn't really focused on original material, although I did make a demo that had two of my originals, or two originals and then two standards that I took to George Butler at Columbia. When I got there, I had made appointments with all these record labels with my little demo under my arm, you know. Yeah, so the whole thing was just absolutely myopia. I knew what I was after.
Yeah. Yeah. Now let's fast forward to your very first recording in 1985. Good Morning Kiss. Fabulous. Love that recording. I was actually checking that out, listening to a lot of it this week. What was that like doing your first recording?
That recording was a series of demos that I was part of a series of demos that I was presenting to Columbia because I wanted, and I think it started at the top, you know. And I had met George Butler in Miami. He came down. He was kind of scouting the band, you know, the University of Miami Big Band. And I was their vocalist. So I started making demos. So now I got the first one from Miami, the 4-song demo. And I've got my senior recital complete with a string ensemble, you know, 10, 12 strings. So these are all different demos that I'm taking into the office of Columbia Records. And bring us something else, you know. So bring us something else, you know. That kept happening to me.
Right.
So around this time, I met a man. I was teaching a little, you know, to make a little extra cash doing some vocals, and one of my students asked me to do some background work with her on a gig she had booked. So I met this wonderful man who provided me with the funds to make this next demo. Okay, so now I got enough. I'm in New York. I'm gonna make another demo for George Butler, and someone said, "Well, what studio are you gonna use?" I was like, "Well, what studio should I? Why don't you use Van Gelder? You know, Rudy Van Gelder Studio." So, okay, fine with me. Where is it? So we go in there. Bobby Watson did the horn parts. Harry Whitaker was my band at the time. Victor Lewis, Curtis, Harry Whitaker. Okay, and Bobby hooked up the horns for me. I knew a lot of the cats. John Faddis, Renee McLean, Cecil Bridgewater. Come on, right? So now I'm at Van Gelder Studios tracking a demo for Columbia. And that's Good Morning Kiss.
Wow.
Because I took that record and it still wasn't good enough. So what happened, and I'm going to leave out some of the not so great part of the story.
Okay.
What happened was I got a licensing deal with a company based in Palo Alto, California. Meanwhile, you got to remember I own these masters, always did. This was a demo initially, but it was a great demo. Yeah. It sounded great. It had all the right ingredients. You know, great players, fun tunes. I think there were 8 tunes. 5 of them were originals, which is unheard of in a recording by a jazz vocalist at that time. And self-penned, no doubt. A couple of collaborations thrown in. And here I am with this great project, and Herb Wong picked it up. Herb Wong in Palo Alto introduced me to a guy named, what was his name? Bullock. I can't remember the first name, but he had this record label called Black Hawk. So we licensed my first record Good Morning Kiss
That's
on
right.
Black Hawk. And the thing shot up the chart so fast.
Yeah, I was reading
Made my
about
head
that.
spin. Yeah, so that's Good Morning Kiss was a demo for Columbia Records.
Amazing, amazing. Now, in the early '90s, you moved to California,
Yes.
and one of the things that I was interested, and I didn't really know this much about you. I mean, of course, you being a visual artist and other things, but I didn't know that you were an actress. And I'm reading and I'm looking at this thing, and it says Carmen Lundy did some acting. She did some off Broadway and played Billie Holiday. Wow. I did not know that.
I got that opportunity through Walter Bishop.
Mm.
Lawrence Holder, a playwright, had written this play called They Were All Gardenias. And it was not about the life of Billie Holiday. I played the role, I was in the role of Billie Holiday at her first recording session after the war ended.
Okay.
So that's what the play is about.
Wow.
And it was sort of like we were at a recording session, and there was this, it's sort of centered around everybody not seeing each other for all these years and getting a chance, because there was, there was no vinyl then. During that time. They used, they needed all that vinyl and those materials to make weapons. So here we are. That's what the role was. But the thing is, I took dance lessons. I took acting lessons. I took voice lessons when I got to New York. I'm still a student.
Right.
Those early years in New York, it was important to just really work at your craft and try to hone the craft and just improve yourself. I took the acting lessons because I found that there was an aspect of performance that has to do with entertainment and the making people feel relaxed and all that. And I was such a musician that I was that, you see the guys who stand there and they just kind of play and they sort of feel waiting to, they're listening and they're in it. Yeah. But it's sort of like, and they may say something during the set, they may not, So I found myself kind of falling into the trappings of the way we presented the music, and felt that I needed to be more comfortable in the setting and on stage as a performer, as a personality. So I took lessons in acting so it was like how to be creative and how to embody a character and not have to deal with notes and carrying not have to deal with the notes. It's all the script and the characterization and the background and all that. So that kind of opened me up. I never really intended to really seriously pursue acting, but I use it as a means of developing my overall comfortability as a performing artist.
Talking about performing artists, when you perform, it's magical, Carmen. I mean, I watched you closely, and I was talking to Bobby about that show you guys did, Madrid, which is one of my favorites. And where did it go? Can you hear me?
Yeah, which show did you say?
Madrid, California.
Oh, the Madrid concert. Okay, yeah.
Oh man, that's one of my favorites. Robert Glasper, Victor Lewis, all of you guys, Mark Shim, and Where'd It Go is my favorite. But your energy, it's almost like when you perform, it's almost like you're acting on stage. You're not just singing, but I look at your body language, how you work the crowd, and little things that you're doing. I'm like, Carmen is just so into her performances, unlike anyone that I've seen before. I mean, I see jazz singers, they sing, but you're like so into your craft, and it's just beautiful to watch. One of the things that I definitely like about you too is just your sense of style, the way you dress. Are you still with me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you froze, but I hear you. There you are.
Little technical difficulties, but just your sense of style. It's almost like the way that you dress, the way that you sing, the way that you perform on stage, all just sort of works together. It's sort of unique. And when I saw you at the Kennedy Center a number of years ago, you were there with your friend, the late Jerry Allen, and her kids were there. And I remember you came out, I was talking to you, and I saw you, you walked out, I said, Carmen, that was beautiful. I loved your performance. And you were just like, thank you. You're just so humble, so sweet. And then I caught you again, of course, last year you and I snapped that photo together. You performed at the Blackburn, I believe it was, in Maryland. And what an incredible show that you put on. Just fantastic. Something I wanted to ask you about is January 25th in Miami is
You went away. Where's your voice? What happened? I can't hear you. No, it went away. It just dropped. I can't hear you.
Technical difficulties. There we go. Yeah, just I don't know why that's happening, technical difficulties. But no, I was talking about Carmen Lundy Day, January 25th in Miami. Tell me about that. That's incredible.
I was invited to return to my alma mater, University of Miami.
Yeah.
And sort of like, master classes, performance with the group, that sort of thing. So it was a nice week spent, old home week, and it ended with this concert. And at the end of the concert, they presented me with distinguished alumni, and then this proclamation. So it's like 9-something at night. Wow. And I find out that it's Carmen Lundy Day. And wow. I got the key they gave me the key to the city, which for a while there, I was taking that key with me when I went back home. I would take that key just in case I would be pulled over because when my tail light was out. Let's not go there right now. Right. But that was Carmen Lundy Day, which is really great. I thought, well, wait a second. So 3 hours. I had 3 hours of celebrating Carmen because I didn't know when I started the day that I was receiving this proclamation. But what a nice, distinctive honor to be recognized in my hometown. And I come from very humble beginnings. Let me tell you, I do. My grandparents, owned the family market in Perrine, Florida, and they were the most respected family. And, they had 11 kids and I was one of the grandkids and, and that was my humble beginnings. My grandfather built the entire block, 3 blocks long. All of his siblings and relatives lived next door to him, and they had the family market and the barber shop and the beauty parlor. And he built her house, and he built, it was like a great little, wonderful little, cozy little childhood.
Yeah.
Where I was so sheltered. I was clueless. So to come back to Miami at that point in my life, in my career, and to receive that sort of a wonderful, special acknowledgement. I want to thank Len Pace for doing that, who was a disc jockey in Miami for a very long time. He and China Vallis, those two guys would spin the records, and they were very instrumental in making that. And along with Dean Hip, I have to acknowledge him. So that night was very special, and there it was, it was over before I knew it.
Incredible. Tell me about this project that you worked on with Terry Lynn Carrington, the Mosaic Project. I think you guys did that in 2011, and I believe she won a Grammy for that.
That's the only Grammy certificate I have. Yeah. I've never been nominated for anything.
That's astounding.
I've never received any kind of recognition from the Grammys at this point in my career. Terry Lynn, what happened was Terry Lynn had done the Mosaic Project.
Mm-hmm.
We had a gig at the Kennedy Center with, I think it was Mary Lou's music.
Yeah.
If I'm right, I think it was Mary Lou's music, Mary Lou Williams. And at the end of the gig, I gave her a copy of the CD I had just finished. And that CD is called Solamente, where I am playing all the instruments on the recording.
Right.
But I didn't set out to make that a recording. It was just the way I work. I record when I practice. I play other instruments just to find the vibe of a tune.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no recording software that I was using at that time. So I was using the ADAT machine, which is a converted videotape that records audio, and I had an 8-track ADAT which forced me to perform the whole song. I couldn't punch in or cut and paste like you can now.
Right.
So I was in New York for something, and we were having dinner, having Chinese food, and I said to my friends, hey, check this out. And they listened, like this at the table in the restaurant. They said, oh my God, you've got Carmen. And they both made me promise them that I would not undo what I had done by, bringing in this musicians. They're not gonna, you just put this out, Carmen, really, this is good. Put this out. And I thought, I'm going to be the laughing stock of the jazz world if I put this record out. So this is what happened. I give this CD to Terry Lynn. About a week or so later, she calls me and says, oh, Carmen, this song, I really love this tune, Show Me a Sign. Would you mind if I included this on this project that I'm doing? I said, sure, go for it. And so what Terry Lynn did was she took my recording from Solamente, altered the vocal, and had, I think it was Tia Fuller playing soprano sax on top of or along with me in the melody, and only half of the tune. And that's what you hear on Mosaic, the Mosaic project. I don't think you'd have to hear my version of Show Me a Sign to get the full tune. But what Terry Lynn did I think it fit so beautifully, and I think it almost rounded out the whole project. You know what I mean? Because it was such an attempt to express her feeling. Something in that song really spoke to her. So I think she really was trying to couch what she was hearing with what I had presented to her. So I wasn't in the studio with her making that record. You froze again.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. I don't know why we're having all these technical difficulties. I was going to ask you about.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn off my air conditioning.
Okay. Sure.
Okay. Hang on a second. So maybe it's I'm just guessing. Maybe
Yeah,
it's
maybe.
Okay.
I was going to ask you, Carmen, about your friend, pianist Jerry Allen, who I miss, who was just a great musician, probably the greatest pianist of her generation. What was it like working with her? And also, you did a beautiful piece on her like a year ago, a little story about, I watched that, like your time or what how you saw Jerry Allen. I thought it was so sweet. But tell me, what was it like working with her? Because you guys seem to have a really good rapport together. And as I said, she was just a brilliant musician.
It's for me, the 80s in New York as a female jazz artist, it was kind of lonely.
Yeah.
It's lonely, to be honest with you. And to have such a brilliant artist come on the scene who was hitting, that was so exciting. It was just exciting. And, a lot of that's an immediate sense of camaraderie, or just to be able to not feel so alone in the walk. But in that little short film that I made, I explained in the beginning how I came to know Jerry. Mm-hmm. And it really was her. She was, when you get to New York and you're hitting and you're killing it, people are talking about it. Yeah. And in our world, the word of mouth gets around. And I heard about Jerry. I was working at the time with another great pianist, Kenny Kirkland. Oh, man. Nagiel and Gums, who we just lost, bless his heart. We lost Kenny back in the early 90s. So I was doing a gig, and these are my go-to guys at the time. Mm-hmm. And Kenny couldn't make this gig that I had booked. So I heard about Jerry, and I said, well, let me just, can you get me a number? I need it for tonight, So Jerry stepped right in. I mean, it was just like that. And I knew it would be. I knew it would be. I just knew that it would be. So we hit it off musically. And I don't think I saw her again for, I don't know, a year or something. We just had that one night we hit. And then she began to establish herself, started to record. I would check her out. And then we we really came together when we started to play Mary Lou's music, Mary Lou Williams's music. And that's when Jerry and I really, I'd say we just really bonded in the music. The way Jerry had an approach that I loved to the piano. There was a kind of a daring approach to her harmony. There was a daring approach she had a wonderful command of all things rhythmic, but it was the way she approached the harmony. You could tell the breadth of understanding, the scholarship was there. And Mary Lou's music had all the components that both of us, I think, benefited from in our own individual expression.
Yeah.
Mary Lou Williams is about the blues. Okay, she's about the blues. Yeah. She's about composition. She was about arranging. She had all of these skills highly developed. And there we were. I had started doing Mary Lou's music about 10 or 12 years before meeting Jerry with Father O'Brien, who was her manager and now the CEO of the foundation. So I was doing a lot of Mary Lou's music, but with her and a lot of great pianists, Mary McPartland.
Yeah.
Did some work with Mary with her music, with Mary Lou's music rather. So here comes Jerry, and when we reconnected through Mary Lou's music, the next thing you know, she's got a record date, I've got a record date. We're always trying to find ways to play together, and respectfully. It wasn't. We were respectfully playing with each other, so that Jerry wasn't trying to establish this new thing where she had a vocalist in the band all the time. It wasn't about that. It was just, this is the music I'm working on. Here are the tunes, and I want you to sing them. Yeah. Jerry, here's the stuff I'm working on, and I need you to play this. It was just like that. So it was really through the music, and particularly during the time that we were both playing Mary Lou Williams's Mass, that we found and understood each other's approach to the music. Yeah. So a lot of things that she does harmonically, I'm fascinated by. Some people associated her with being in the avant-garde.
Yeah, she was heavily influenced by McCoy Tyner and Herbie Hancock. Those are her two heroes.
Yes, and when you are influenced by that kind of an artist, those kinds of players, and you still manage to develop your own sound,
right,
your own approach, I'm at a loss for words right now, but this is how profoundly gifted and influential and impactful working with Jerry has been for me. Yeah. And I miss her.
I do too.
I miss her. I would ask these younger pianists, who this legacy that she's left behind, I would ask these younger pianists to come to know her music. I mean, they all know Jerry Allen, they all know who we're talking about, but can they sit down and play one of her beautiful compositions and respect that this is all you got to do, just play this. And I don't see enough of that, quite frankly, in these young developing pianists where they're really going to Jerry. You know what I mean? And I'm going to tell you guys, you might discover something if you go there instead of taking the track that's, more traveled or the road that's definitely, got a path dug in it, go there and you'll walk away with a better understanding of your own sense of your direction. That's how much is offered in what Jerry has left us in this short time. And prolific, yes, indeed. I really miss her.
Yeah, I do too. Well, listen, Carmen, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. It was a joy to talk to you. You are one of the greats of the greats. And hang on for a minute. I'm about to close out the show.
I got a couple of things I need to say too. Okay.
Please.
Okay, so Modern Ancestors, my last release. Actually, when I say last, I mean most recent.
Yes.
It's eligible this year for Grammy. So Get the record, please.
Yes.
Check it
You
out.
hear that,
First
everybody?
tune, Time for
Get
Peace.
that record.
Yeah, thank you. It's A Time for Peace, first track. A Time for Peace, y'all, first track. On June 20th on the OWN network, there's a film by Chan Berry called Dark Girls 2. And my song Grace that I co-wrote with Simpiwe Dana, South African vocalist Simpiwe Dana, is being used in the end credits. So that's kind of nice to kind of know and finally see some of the work being used in sync with film. So that's on the OWN network on June 30th. And so look out for Dark Girls 2 by Chan Berry. You get to hear my tune. And one other thing I wanted to mention that Disney Hall is rebroadcasting on their website Ellington, the best of the sacred concerts, were accompanying vocal arrangements for Master Chorale. That's 150 voices, by the way. We'll be doing, I did 2 arrangements of Mary Lou Williams's piece, Tell Them Not to Talk Too Long, and I Have a Dream, both the words of Martin Luther King set to music, arranged by Mary Lou Williams. They're going to broadcast that on June 26th from Disney Hall. So I just wanted to mention to the audience a couple of things that are happening.
Did you, is this posted on your Facebook page or Twitter so your fans can see?
I'm sure that the closer we get there, I'll probably upload something there.
Well, listen, again, thank you. And like I said, hang on. Well, you've heard it from Carmen Lundy. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.